Driftwood Hearts by Dean Whitaker. The late September breeze carried the scent of salt and seaweed across Old Orchard Beach, blowing Emma's auburn hair as she meandered along the shoreline. Ahead of her, Ethan navigated around scattered pieces of driftwood, his worn navy hoodie a familiar silhouette against the golden evening light. The Maine coastline stretched endlessly before them, its rugged beauty unchanging since their high school days when they'd first started taking these walks together. Emma paused to pick up a perfectly smooth stone, running her thumb over its surface before skipping it across the waves. 3 bounces, not her best effort. She'd never matched Ethan's record of 7, though he'd spent countless afternoons trying to teach her the proper technique. "You're doing that thing again," Ethan called over his shoulder, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "What thing?" Emma quickened her pace to catch up with him, her canvas sneakers leaving shallow imprints in the damp sand. "That thing where you get lost in your head and forget there's anyone else around." He slowed his stride to match hers. "I've known you long enough to recognize your thinking face." Emma felt warmth creep into her cheeks, and not just from the wind. "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do." "Oh yeah." Ethan's eyes looked with amusement. "Let's see, you're worried about that grant proposal for the Marine Conservation Project. You've been biting your lower lip all afternoon?" Classic stressed Emma behavior. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. "Lucky guess." "Not luck. 7 years of friendship, remember?" The word friendship hung in the air between them, and Emma felt that familiar flutter in her stomach, the one she'd been trying to ignore for months now. She watched as Ethan bent down to retrieve a piece of sea glass, holding it up to catch the light. His artistic eye was always drawn to these small treasures. It was what made him such a talented photographer. "Remember when we used to collect these?" he asked, offering her the smooth green fragment. "You were convinced we'd find enough to make that mosaic you saw in that art magazine." "We did make it eventually," Emma reminded him. "It's still hanging in my parents' garden." Half finished, Ethan corrected with a laugh. "We got distracted when Sarah Matthews invited everyone to that end of summer bonfire." "You mean when you got distracted by Sarah Matthews?" Emma teased, though the memory stirred something uncomfortable in her chest. She'd spent that entire evening watching Ethan try to impress Sarah with his surfing stories, while she sat alone by the fire, pretending to be fascinated by her cup of hot chocolate. Ethan's expression softened. "Ancient history. Besides, I seem to remember you were quite taken with Jake Cooper that summer." "I was 16. Everyone was taken with Jake Cooper." Emma kicked it a small wave as it rushed past her feet, sending sparkles of water into the air. "He wasn't exactly the deepest conversation partner, though." "Unlike me, you mean?" Ethan pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. "I'll have you know my conversational depths are unfathomable." "Unfathomable is one word for it." Emma laughed, but her amusement faded as she noticed Ethan's expression grow serious. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and pink, making his blue eyes appear almost violet. "Can we sit for a bit? At our spot?" Emma nodded, her heart picking up speed. Their spot was a large flat rock formation that jutted out over the sand, perfectly positioned to watch the sunset. They'd spent countless hours there over the years, talking about everything from college applications to family drama to their dreams for the future. As they settled onto the familiar surface, Emma pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The evening was growing cooler, and she wished she'd brought a warmer jacket. Without a word, Ethan shrugged off his hoodie and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so characteristic of their relationship, that it made her throat tight with emotion. "Thanks," she murmured, slipping her arms into the sleeves. It smelled like him, a mixture of laundry detergent and the herbal tea he'd become addicted to during college. "Emma," he began, then stopped, running a hand through his wind-blown hair. "I've been thinking a lot lately." "Dangerous habit," she quipped, trying to ease the sudden tension in the air. He smiled, but it was different from his usual easy grin. "Maybe, but some thoughts are worth the risk." He turned slightly to face her better. "Do you remember that day in sophomore year when I missed the bus and had to walk 3 miles to school in the rain?" Emma nodded, unsure where this was going. "You showed up looking like a drowned rat. Mrs. Henderson almost didn't let you into English class. But you had that spare hoodie in your locker," he continued. "The one with the dolphins on it that you'd gotten from that aquarium field trip. You never gave it back," Emma realized with a start. "I still have it," he admitted. "It's in my closet at home. I kept it because," he paused, taking a deep breath, because it reminded me of how you've always been there, taking care of me in your quiet way, even when I was too stupid to notice." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it over the sound of the waves. "Ethan, let me finish," he said gently, "because if I don't say this now, I might lose my nerve." He shifted closer, close enough that she could see the faint freckles across his nose, souvenirs from their summer adventures. "Something changed while we were away at college. Or maybe it didn't change at all. Maybe it was always there, and I just wasn't ready to see it." Emma held her breath, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over them. "Every time something good happens, you're the first person I want to tell. When things go wrong, your voice is the one I need to hear. I catch myself looking for you in crowds even when I know you're hundreds of miles away." He gave a short, self-deprecating laugh. "I've dated other people, tried to convince myself that what we have is just friendship, but Emma," his voice softened, "nobody else has ever felt like coming home." Tears formed in Emma's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why now?" she whispered. "Because I'm tired of pretending," he replied simply. "Because every time I see you, I feel like I'm about to burst with all the things I'm not saying. Because you're my best friend, and I'm in love with you, and I needed you to know." The words hung in the air between them, beautiful and terrifying. Emma's mind raced through 1,000 memories. Ethan helping her study for calculus until midnight, bringing her soup when she had the flu, driving 5 hours just to surprise her at college when she'd had a particularly rough week. All the little moments that had been leading to this one. "Say something," he murmured, vulnerability clear in his voice. "Even if it's that I've completely ruined everything." Instead of speaking, Emma reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. His skin was warm despite the cool evening air, and she felt him exhale shakily at her touch. "You haven't ruined anything?" she said finally, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "How could you, when I've been falling in love with you too?" The hope that bloomed across his face was like watching the sun break through clouds. "Yeah?" Emma nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "Yeah. I think I realized it last Christmas, when you spent 3 hours helping my dad put together that ridiculous bicycle for my little sister, even though you had that deadline for your photography portfolio the next day. Those instruction manuals were in Swedish," Ethan protested, but he was grinning now, his thumb tracing patterns on the back of her hand. "They weren't in Swedish, you drama queen. But you stayed anyway, because that's who you are. You've always been there, steady and sure, making everything better just by being you." Ethan reached up with his free hand, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "So what do we do now?" Emma leaned slightly into his touch. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm scared of messing this up. You're too important to lose." "Hey," he said softly, "look at me." When she met his eyes, he continued, "We've made it through my terrible poetry phase, your obsession with that awful punk band, and that time I accidentally set fire to your chemistry project. I think we can handle this." A laugh bubbled up from Emma's chest, releasing some of the tension. "Your poetry wasn't that bad. It was horrific, and we both know it." His expression grew serious again. "But Emma, we don't have to figure everything out right now. We can take it slow, see where it leads. All I know is that whatever happens, I want to face it with you." The sun was nearly gone now, painting the sky in deep purples and blues. A cool breeze swept in from the ocean, and Emma snuggled deeper into Ethan's hoodie, breathing in its familiar comfort. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Let's see where this goes, together." Ethan's smile broadened into that full, bright grin she loved so much. Slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. "Together," he agreed softly. They stayed like that for a long moment, sharing the same breath, the same space, while the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky above them. The waves continued their eternal dance with the shore, and somewhere in the distance, a seabird called out across the water. Finally, Emma pulled back slightly, though she kept her hand in his. "We should probably head back before it gets completely dark." Ethan nodded, but made no move to get up. "Just a few more minutes?" he asked, and Emma could hear years of longing in his voice. She agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. As the last light faded from the sky, Emma felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they might face, she knew with absolute certainty that this, here now, with Ethan was exactly where she was meant to be. The piece of sea glass was still in her pocket, and she smiled, thinking that maybe it was time to finish that mosaic after all. They had all the time in the world now, and they would build their future together, one piece at a time.